Trump once again shakes the political stage with a bold prediction, giving Vladimir Putin just a couple of weeks to make his next move, and yet, there is still no sign of peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. The words echo louder than ever, sparking heated debates, raising fresh fears, and making many ask the question, is America watching history repeat itself, or is this a turning point that could reshape the global order? When Trump speaks, the world listens, sometimes with agreement, often with alarm, but always with attention. His remarks about Putin are not casual statements. They are signals, deliberate in tone, and heavy with implication. To say Putin has only a couple of weeks suggests an urgent timeline, a countdown that the rest of the world cannot afford to ignore. The war in Ukraine has stretched on for more than 2 years, grinding through cities, breaking families apart, and draining resources at an unimaginable pace. Every day that passes without progress toward peace only deepens the wounds. Yet here we are, with no serious negotiations, no breakthrough diplomacy, no sign that either side is ready to step back. And then, Trump steps in with a claim that time is running out for Putin. But what does that really mean? Is it a warning? Is it an inside calculation from someone who once sat in the Oval Office? Or is it a way to pressure the current administration by framing the conflict as a crisis that America has failed to contain? Trump has always positioned himself as someone who can deal with strongmen, someone who can sit across from Putin and negotiate from a place of strength. His supporters point to past meetings, to his unconventional style, as proof that he understands how to handle such adversaries. But his critics warn that this is exactly the problem, that Trump's approach emboldens leaders like Putin rather than restrains them. In America, these words ripple through the political landscape. Lawmakers, commentators, and ordinary citizens all interpret them through the lens of what they fear most. For some, it's the possibility that Trump is right, that the current administration is simply out of time, failing to act while Putin plans his next move. For others, it's the concern that Trump's words could be reckless, feeding instability and undermining America's position on the global stage. Meanwhile, the families in Ukraine who continue to live under the shadow of war don't care about the political soundbites. They care about survival. They care about waking up tomorrow without the sound of sirens, without the fear of missiles, without the worry that their children may not see another day. To them, promises of peace or warnings of looming deadlines are nothing but words, until they see action. Yet the stage is set, the tension is undeniable. Trump throws down the timeline, Putin remains unpredictable, and the White House continues its careful balancing act, navigating aid packages, NATO commitments, and the ever-growing weariness of the American public who wonder how long this war will demand their tax dollars, their support, their attention. The setup is clear: a former president making bold claims, a current president under pressure, and a Russian leader who thrives on testing boundaries. The conflict grows deeper, the questions sharper. Will Putin escalate? Will the current administration shift its strategy? Or will Trump's words prove prophetic, marking a moment when the clock truly began to tick down? For now, the conflict only rises in tension. Reports from the front lines paint a picture of exhaustion but not surrender. Ukraine continues to resist, pushing back where it can, holding territory where it must, and pleading with allies for more support. Russia, meanwhile, shows no signs of slowing, adapting, and pressing forward with its long game. All of this plays out as American politics becomes a battlefield of its own. Trump's prediction is not just about foreign policy. It's about domestic perception, about reminding Americans that he once held the power to make these calls, and suggesting that he could do it again. Every word he speaks is calculated for maximum impact, not only abroad but right here at home. But here is the real question: why a couple of weeks? Why such a precise, narrow window of time? It creates suspense. It creates urgency. It forces everyone listening to ask what will happen when the clock runs out. Will there be a dramatic escalation on the battlefield? A new wave of sanctions? A surprise move in diplomacy that no one saw coming? Or is it all part of the theater, a way to dominate headlines and seize the narrative? We do not yet know. And that is what makes this moment so dangerous, so electrifying, so filled with possibility and dread. Because when timelines are set, expectations are created. And when expectations are created, people brace for impact. This is not the end of the story. Far from it. Trump's words may be just the beginning of a new chapter. One where America, Russia, and Ukraine all move closer to a breaking point. The stage is shifting, the tension rising, and the world waits, breath held, for what comes next. The clock keeps ticking, and every second feels heavier as Trump's words echo in the American consciousness. He has put a time frame on one of the most dangerous conflicts of our era, and now people can't stop wondering what might happen when those weeks run out. It's a dangerous kind of suspense, one that grips politicians in Washington, military analysts at the Pentagon, and everyday citizens scrolling headlines late at night. The administration in power now faces a dilemma that can't be easily dismissed. If nothing happens by the end of Trump's supposed countdown, critics will mock his prediction as baseless theater. But if something does happen, if Putin does make a move, then questions will explode across America. Did Trump know something others didn't? Was there a sign everyone else ignored? And what does it say about the ability of the current leadership to protect American interests? In the halls of Congress, the division is sharp. Some argue that Trump's words, whether exaggerated or not, should be taken as a serious warning. They point to past moments when bold claims about global conflicts turned out to be closer to the truth than many wanted to admit. Others dismiss it entirely, accusing him of sowing fear for political gain, of trying to rewrite the narrative of who can really lead America in times of crisis. Meanwhile, the Pentagon prepares for every possibility. Behind closed doors, intelligence briefings circulate with maps covered in red lines, arrows, and shifting estimates of troop strength. The reality is that Putin's next step is not predictable, no matter how loudly anyone claims otherwise. What is predictable is that uncertainty creates pressure, and pressure creates mistakes. On the streets of Kiev, families look at these debates from a distance, yet they feel the consequences every day. Children sleep in basements, trains carry evacuees through the night, and soldiers brace themselves for another wave of attacks. For them, whether Trump's timeline proves accurate or not makes little difference. The war is not an abstraction. It is their daily reality, and every day without resolution feels like borrowed time. The conflict grows deeper as American politics intertwines with global stakes. Cable news networks run endless coverage, splicing together Trump's statement with grim footage from the front lines, with clips of the current president giving cautious remarks about ongoing support for Ukraine. The contrast is stark. One voice speaks in absolutes, the other in measured tones. And this clash of styles fuels the rising tension across the country. What happens if Americans begin to believe that Trump's words hold more weight than official briefings from the current administration? Trust begins to erode. Confidence in leadership wavers. And in times of global instability, perception often becomes as powerful as fact. But this is not just about America and Russia. The ripple effect touches every corner of the globe. European leaders watch closely, knowing that if the United States falters in its support, the balance of power could shift dramatically. NATO allies hold urgent discussions, weighing the limits of their own contributions. And in countries like Poland and the Baltic states, where the shadow of Moscow looms closest, Trump's countdown only intensifies the fear that history might repeat itself. Back in the United States, ordinary citizens ask simpler, more personal questions. How much longer will this war cost American taxpayers billions? How much longer before it drags America closer to direct confrontation? How much longer before an overseas conflict becomes a domestic burden no one can ignore? These questions don't have easy answers, but the unease behind them keeps growing. The movie-like flow of this story is unmistakable. Act 1 gave us the setup, Trump's shocking declaration. Act 2 now pulls us into the conflict, a rising tide of doubt, fear, and anticipation. And yet, the climax still hangs out of reach, just beyond the horizon, daring us to guess how it will unfold. Every statement, every decision, every rumor adds fuel to the suspense. Anonymous sources whisper of possible escalations, of hidden negotiations happening in back channels, of military strategies being updated hour by hour. But none of it resolves the central question: is Trump's timeline a bluff, or is it a prophecy? The answer may not come today, or tomorrow, or even before the so-called deadline. But the very fact that the question exists is enough to shape behavior in ways that could alter the course of this conflict. Leaders react not only to what is happening, but to what they believe might happen. And that belief, driven by words, by warnings, by timelines, is now steering the ship of history into uncharted waters. The tension refuses to break. And as the weeks march forward, the world edges closer to whatever comes next. No resolution yet, no peace talks in sight, only the weight of uncertainty pressing harder against America and its allies. The script does not end here. It only tightens, pulling us deeper into the unknown, setting the stage for the next act in a story whose outcome no one can yet predict. The days bleed into nights, and the tension thickens with every headline. Trump's words about Putin having just a couple of weeks left still hang in the air like a storm cloud no one can ignore. What was once dismissed as another bold claim now feels like a ticking clock, each moment carrying the weight of uncertainty. The administration in power continues its measured tone, offering steady reassurances, but beneath the surface, the pressure is undeniable. Officials move cautiously, weighing each decision, knowing that one wrong step could tip the balance. American news cycles loop the same images: burned out apartment blocks in Ukraine, soldiers trudging through mud, civilians carrying belongings across shattered streets. Yet layered over these images are the voices of American politicians, analysts, and commentators, dissecting Trump's words again and again. Some frame him as reckless, throwing fuel on a dangerous fire. Others see him as a prophet of sorts, someone who dares to say out loud what others only whisper in private briefings. This divide mirrors the state of the nation itself, split not just over policy, but over who gets to define truth in an age where perception and power are inseparable. In Washington, quiet conversations take place in dimly lit rooms. Advisors trade intelligence updates, each trying to read between the lines of what Putin might actually do. Cyber attacks flare across Europe, raising alarms that the digital front may become just as destructive as the physical battlefield. Energy markets tremble as Europe braces for a winter that could still be manipulated by Moscow. And all the while, America watches, torn between its role as the arsenal of democracy and the weary sigh of a public wondering how much longer this will last. The cinematic nature of this moment cannot be ignored. We are deep in Act 3, where tension climbs toward its breaking point. Trump's deadline draws closer, and whether or not it carries truth almost becomes irrelevant. The belief in it alone has shifted the conversation, forcing allies, enemies, and the American public to brace for a moment of impact. Suspense builds not because we know what will happen, but because we don't. And that not knowing creates a theater of dread. On the ground in Ukraine, every explosion, every push at the front, every act of resistance is now seen through the prism of this looming timeline. If Putin moves dramatically, will the United States escalate? If Putin hesitates, will Trump claim victory for having forced his hand simply by speaking? And if nothing happens at all, will America finally breathe, or will the unease simply reset, waiting for the next crisis? NATO allies hold emergency sessions, preparing contingencies no one wants to admit out loud. Leaders trade phone calls in the dead of night, warning each other of the consequences if American resolve falters. The stakes are not just European, they are global. If Russia succeeds in Ukraine, what message does it send to other nations watching closely? If America cannot keep its commitments abroad, what does it mean for its credibility at home? And back in the United States, families talk about it over dinner tables, workers discuss it on factory floors, students debate it in classrooms. The war feels distant, yet the fear of its consequences lingers close. Rising costs, economic uncertainty, and the lingering fear that America could be pulled into something far larger hang like a shadow over everyday life. Trump's words, though just one man's voice, have become part of that shadow. The payoff moment grows closer. Not a resolution, not yet, but a collision between perception and reality. If something dramatic unfolds, Trump's declaration will be remembered as the countdown that warned of it. If nothing happens, it may still linger as a moment when the world held its breath, bracing for an explosion that never came. Either way, the impact is real. Because the power of words is not only in their accuracy, but in their ability to shape behavior, stir fear, and force preparation. And so, the curtain falls not with closure, but with intensity. The world stands on the edge of decision, America divided in its interpretations, Ukraine fighting for survival, Russia pressing its advantage, and Trump's words lingering like a final note that refuses to fade. The story does not resolve neatly. It rarely does. Instead, It ends with a cinematic punch, a reminder that in our time, power is not only measured by armies and weapons, but by voices that can change the course of history. Trump gave Putin a couple of weeks. The clock still ticks. And as it does, America waits, tense, divided, and aware that the next move, whenever it comes, could change everything.